Okay, I'm called Victor Ikawa. I head research at Safaricom. And before that, I was heading research for Airtel Africa. I've done a bit of work of the Netherlands and a bit of work of the Middle East for Zain Group, something called geomarketing. But I'm more passionate about, on my spare time, I'm more passionate about the environment, trees and wildlife and that kind of stuff. I grew up in Homa Bay, and I was the little geek in class, so being bullied by all the boys and that kind of thing, the classic bookworm. And then I went to Alliance High School. Maybe that confirms that I was probably a bookworm, but that's debatable. And then I realized that the same thing was going to go on. The boys would continue bullying me. And I decided to, I thought that science would be a good way to stop people from bullying you around. And began my journey, a bit of bodybuilding, extreme fitness. So I used to probably jog 8 to 16 kilometers a day, carry weights, and I was the school hockey goalkeeper. And by late Form 2, I was actually in the school rugby team, which I think was not an easy thing, even now. So I carried on like that for a few years. Same thing in college, rugby, hockey, gym, running 16 kilometers. So I remember going for jogs and I go with people, they pick up a tattoo bag. That was years back. I've since stopped doing that though, so it's a bit of an interesting history.
First of all, I think, just to describe what I think research is, I think it's a systematic way of looking at the world and looking at the world's issues. We have a lot of biases, and naturally we have a lot of stereotypes, biases, which make us make certain decisions that are not necessarily the right decisions. So for Safaricom, I think that's particularly important. Looking at the scale of impact that we have across the different fields that we are. Having a non-biased approach to how we look at issues is particularly important, and also a structural way in which to look at problems. So for example, if there's a data problem or there is a network problem or whatever problem there is, a structured way in which we look at that problem, so that when you get to a boardroom, it's not about people's opinions, but it's a very structured way of looking at the world. I think it's quite important that way of looking at research is embedded within an organization. For our country, I don't think we do enough research. There's so many topics that are of interest. The funding that is available, if you look at, I don't know whether it's still called NACOSTI by the government, for the different research institutes, for universities. If you look at the amount of structured research that happens, we could do a lot more. Obviously, what happens is students pay for research themselves and that kind of thing. So you'd argue that there's a lot of research. But I think big organizations, governments, research institutes, which have been set up to address different topics, are not in the number with which they're needed within this country. The other day I was chatting with someone, and one of the professors at the university, and he was saying, Victor, even if you look at cancer research, we've not invested in it. There's a lot of funding for malaria research, but when you look at the different diseases, there's a lot of opportunity to really query certain things in a lot more depth across different fields. So classic medicine, I'm an urban planner, environmental planner. even just the way humans interact with each other. I think there's a lot of opportunity for that. I reflected on that maybe a couple of weeks back. And when we were running the Lewa Marathon, I was with a couple of colleagues and I stopped them and I said, oh, look at that bird up there. It was a butler eagle. I don't know whether you know the butler eagle. It's a giant, majestic eagle with a very big wingspan. And it performs very interesting acrobatics in the sky. And it's truly one of the more beautiful eagles to see when you're out bird watching. So I think in a lot of ways, Bob is a butler eagle. As I interacted with him, either work-wise, I mean, sometimes he had a lot of time. And I think not everyone is comfortable, sitting with the CEO for 3 hours or that kind of thing. And once in a while he would say, not once in a while, actually a couple of times, oh, Victor, come right up to the office. And when I walked up to him, we could chat about work, and then the other things used to be, we could discuss, so what are you reading now? And we had this thing of sharing our reading lists. I remember the last set of reading lists we discussed in detail. There's Ranciman's The End of Democracy. And he was saying we spend too much time thinking about democracy, and that democracy is really a great thing. And yet, if you look, his question was, oh, Victor, which country do you think is the most democratic? And I would say, best of population, maybe India. And, it's like, no way. And then we'd end up having a very interesting debate about where democracy lay or didn't lie. And then we talked about, he really didn't want to talk about this, but I bought the book and put it in my audio, and I was like, okay, so that's what Bob was trying to tell me. It's a book called The Last Lecture by somebody called Randy, somebody who's discovered to have cancer and then has 4 months to live and decides, in that particular last lecture, what's he going to talk about? And I mean, not to spoil the fun of reading the book, the aspect of family comes up really strong in that book. And, I would counter back with my own reading list. The Meaning of Life. There's a beautiful book, The Meaning of Life. And The Meaning of Life from several intellectual traditions. So if you got a red Indian into this room right now and ask him what is life, it's viewed very differently. It's this metal is some soil. So when he gets in here, he sees soil. A bottle of water, he sees rainfall. And that's the meaning of life. Life is an intertwined way of living with different people within the society. And we could debate on, Aristotle and, so we used to have some kind of intellectual banter. And we used to joke later on that, between the two of us, it's only the two of us who have a PhD in this room. And it was a bit hilarious, but he had that kind of sense of humor. I think the one thing I learned from Bob was there's obviously all this intellectual stuff, but he always used to throw back the reality of things the way they were. So if I told him, if he asked me about the youth, what are some insights about the youth, and we kind of chat on in an academic way, and then I would say, for example, the youth are very identity oriented, and he would say, identity, is that why they like taking a selfie with me all the time? And I would say, yeah, I think it's an identity, self-esteem thing. And he'd say, I took a selfie once with the UN Assembly, and do you think it was an identity thing? And that kind of joke. Yes, I think it's how do you relate abstract things to real day-to-day things. How do you have fun as you're doing whatever you're doing? and just a very ruthless discipline. I wrote a couple of books in 2017, and Bob got back to me within 24 hours. He'd actually read through them and he had comments. And he used to say that, he wonders why people don't reply to their emails. He has more emails than anyone in the company. And he has time to go through all of them and get back to people in a real way. And I was particularly touched by that because my inbox even right now, probably there's 100 items. But it's how do you get that discipline? How do you focus? How do you zero in on issues and resolve them? That strength of mind and character, I think I found it really admirable.